Morning, folks. Do you ever kind of wake up, do you have kind of one of those days where you wake up and hope, maybe today nothing's going to change? Sometimes we feel like, we're just about hanging on. We're being kind of buffeted by constant innovation and evolution and change. And some days I wake up and I go, well, maybe I hope today there isn't any change. And maybe today is going to be the day. But I don't think so. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to see 21,000 people added to Twitter. In the next 30 minutes, the equivalent of 146 days will be spent on Facebook. And what's happening is that things are changing extremely rapidly. And we're seeing gazillions of tweets, right? But should we care that Lady Gaga has 20 million followers on Facebook? Because we're concerned, most of us in this room, about B2B sales. But one of the things I think that we'll see is that consumer behavior, and we've seen this over the last kind of 10 years, consumer behavior predicts B2B behavior. And while not all consumers are B2B buyers, all B2B buyers are consumers. And if we learn about salespeople as consumers and B2B buyers as consumers, we can learn a lot about the different interactions that happen between salespeople and their customers. And we see the environments are changing, and we see the tools are changing. And what's really important is what we're seeing is that the interactions are changing. And interactions and a series of interactions is what happens when a sale happens. And there are 6 factors that I think we should think about as we chart our sales tool journey. If we start off first and look at what's happening in mobile, right? Mobile is happening everywhere, right? We have more mobile devices in the US than we have people. And I wonder sometimes what all those people are doing with the mobile devices, apart from following Lady Gaga, right? In 2016, we're going to have 10 billion devices in the world in a population that's projected to be about 7.3 billion people. We're going to see 50 times more traffic on smartphones than we see today. This is a Cisco fact. And you wonder what those folks are going to do. But things are happening really quickly. And what we're seeing is, and you've seen charts like this before, but the rate at which things change. And it started back in 2002, and you see the numbers here refer to 360 days it took for the iPod to get to 1 million users. And moving up to 2010, when it took 30 days for the iPad. And then if we look at what happened last week, right, or in the last couple of weeks, right, how many days it took to get the new iPad to 1 million users, right? 1 day. And when Apple launched the iPad, the world went mad. 20% of US adults own a tablet. The number of tablets in the world doubled between December 2011 and January 2012. And we need to consider that as we look at what the salespeople are going to be doing. And they're going to be moving, and they're going to be changing, and they're going to be moving all around. And what happens in that is we need to consider how they communicate, how they learn, how they sell, and how they do that in a much shorter attention time span than they've had before. And if we're equipping our salespeople with iPads, I know we are, and I'm sure many of you are, then the other thing we need to consider is, as we know, just from a technology point of view, Flash is dead. Sorry, that's the wrong Flash, right? So, but as we kind of step through this, right, it's really important that we do. And if we think about it, and you'll have heard a lot about social over the past 24 hours, and I kind of think of it a bit like this. If mobile is the needle, then social is the thread. And mobile enables us to take information everywhere, right? And allows us to be location sensitive and understand where we are and bring the information with us. But social lets us weave our own tapestry and lets us work with people to create, co-create, curate information to build our own landscape. And we do that in our own voice, and we amplify the voice of others. And it lets us bring that together. And everybody's doing social, right? So it doesn't matter what the demographic is, everybody's doing social. And we need to consider what that is. Some people aren't that smart doing it, and 17% of US adults have bumped into something while they're updating their Facebook page, right? And that's important. But what's really important, and you see a few people yesterday spoke about customer lifetime value, and I think customer lifetime value is being superseded, and necessarily so, by customer network value. And the old form of reference selling, in my opinion, is dead, right? We need to think about the kind of social landscape that we're operating in. And it's not just about Twitter, and it's not just about Facebook, it's not just about LinkedIn, it's about our whole online presence. When we started looking at this, and I did an experiment on this over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, and some of the things you see on the screen here is some of the things that we did. So Jim was talking yesterday about getting blogging going, and I started a blog about 4 years ago, and last year we had 250,000 visitors. And something that we learned in what I term the social universe, as we look at all these different things, is if you be authentic, if you're honest and you take a position, and you go out there and you give first and expect nothing in return, you begin to get some value from the social network. And we did that on the blog, and it's Dealmaker365 is the blog, and we have a YouTube channel. And we provide a lot of information on our products, and we do demos, we do those kind of things. And it shortens the sales cycle because people go and get that information in their own time, in their own space. We do a bunch of stuff on Twitter. And then 2 things we do that in the industry that I'm in, which is the sales effectiveness industry, sometimes was viewed as being a little bit heretical, and giving away consulting for free. So because we've managed to kind of measure and gather a lot of data over the years, I have a lot of data, and we've measured 10 million sales cycles, and we have more data probably on a sales cycle than any organization. We measure about 1,200 data points per opportunity sales cycle. And we do that, it means we can learn stuff. And I mean, so with Dealmaker Index, it's a self-assessment health check that you can do and find out how you might improve. And there's some good advice in there, we believe, that you can go and do. And we do that for free. And another thing we do, which is Dealmaker Genius, and because we've learned about lots of different industries and how sales cycles work and what works, you can go to Dealmaker Genius and in about 15 minutes get a sales process for free for your industry, no obligation. But we believe that what it does is we're giving some value, and we've had thousands of companies come and do that. And following on from that, some of them have come and bought our Dealmaker product, and that's a good thing. So Gerhard mentioned intelligence, and I'm going to talk about this for a second. So here's a question. So how many of you have a big deal or an important deal that you're thinking about, that you care about right now? Anybody? So think for 1 minute that after this session, you check your mail, and there's a mail to say you lost the deal. What do you think the reason is? What's the number 1 reason? So if you got that, so that's not it. Right? So if you think about it again and go, okay, so if that's not it, what might it be? And this is the question that I refer to as the critical risk. And it's something that I do with our own sales team a lot. I go, so if you're going to lose the deal, what's the number 1 reason? And what tends to happen is people go, well, I didn't effectively navigate the organization, or I don't have a good competitive strategy, or whatever else. And I'm going, okay, well, if that's the case, would it make sense to do something about it now, before you get that email? And you can do that if you learn about if you have the process and you have the knowledge and you have the reasons why you might fail. So I thought I'd do an experiment, because I'm an Apple geek, right? And I thought I'd ask Siri. I have so many apples in my house, it's like an orchard. So I thought I'd ask Siri, and I said, okay, so I'm working on this big deal, and say, okay, so if I'm to lose this ABC trucking deal, Siri, what do you think the reason is? And of course, unfortunately, he said, let me think about that. Let me do a web search. And of course, that didn't work, right? But if I think about that, Siri, of course, doesn't know much about sales. It can help me go find a pizza, right? And I can go, where is the nearest pizza restaurant? And Siri can say, well, I know where you are. I have a database of knowledge about pizza restaurants. I have all the maps that I need to get there, and I can tell you where to go to get your nearest pizza. But Siri doesn't know a ton about sales. It doesn't know a lot about business-to-business sales. It doesn't have a map of my customer's buying process. So it can't necessarily help. So let me talk about intelligence for a second. And by intelligence, there are a few things I mean. So knowledge is always important, right? But knowledge without data and context doesn't have a lot of value. But I believe that if you have knowledge, data, and context, and apply some smart reasoning, then you can deliver some intelligence. So if I know about how sales in this industry normally works, if I know what our sales cycle is, if I know how I typically work against my competitors, if I know those kind of things and why I might typically lose deals, then perhaps I can go and provide some advice. I don't know if any of you know a company called Lattice Engines. Lattice Engines applies this kind of trend-based analysis and pattern matching and those kind of things to do a lot of stuff for high-volume transaction-type sales. Right? Very successful applying this kind of stuff and saying, in this area, these are the products that are going to sell, or these are the issues that might cause you some concern. And we try and do the same thing with a thing that we call DealMaker Coach Me, which what it does is it looks at my deal. It knows what typically happens. It knows where I am. It knows the data, context, knowledge. It takes 20 years of knowledge, puts it all in the thing, and looks at it and says, you know what? Here are the key issues that you have for this deal at this point in time, this context, this knowledge, this data, right? And if I can do that, why wouldn't I do it? So if I can apply knowledge and data, I think that's important. There was some conversations yesterday about analytics. So this is T.S. Eliot. So who knows what country T.S. Eliot was born in? Anyone? Ireland? Nope. So T.S. Eliot is an important English language poet, and most people will believe that he was an English poet. He was actually born in St. Louis, Missouri, in 1888, and moved to England in 1914 and became an English citizen, and is viewed as such. In 1935, he wrote a poem called "The Rock," right? And one of the lines from "The Rock" goes, "Where is the knowledge we have lost in information?" And it's like as if he was kind of foretelling the kind of deluge of data that we have to deal with. I also learned yesterday, because I'm from Ireland, but I learned from yesterday that Missouri is the show me state, and it's kind of particularly applicable as we kind of look at analytics. And when I think about analytics, sometimes people go and say, well, let's look at the data. And I'd rather if people would think about, let's look at the key questions that we want to ask. What is it that I'm trying to chart a course for success at? And then I look at the data, and I do some analysis, and I look at some trends, and I see what is it that I can find out so that I know where I have to go. In sales, there are really only 4 things that I can care about. Everything we do in sales is measured with just 4 levers: the number of deals, the value of the deal, my win rate, and my sales cycle. And we call that the sales velocity. And I want to look at and I want to measure at all times the sales velocity that I'm stepping through. So nothing else impacts my revenue number than deals, win rate, average value, and sales cycle. And when I ask people about this and I say, which one of these is most important, I get a range of different answers. And if you ask a salesperson what's important, in most cases they'll go, I need more leads. What kind of leads do you want? I don't know, I just want more leads, right? I never have enough leads, right? But the number of deals that we're working on is only one of the factors that applies. Right, so we need to kind of look at these and measure the data as it applies on this. And I could try and look at this from an analytics point of view in 4 different stages. And I start with the data, and then where we are today in most analytics that we see today is what I refer to as situational analytics. What happened? Now the problem with what happened is there's not much I can do about it. Right, so it would be nice if we take some patterns and trends and say, okay, so based on that data, what will happen? And then the nirvana of this is, and because of that, what should I do next? And looking at the coaching thing we saw, for example, so what should I do next so I don't lose the deal? Or the favorite thing we might think about is forecasting, right? Everybody loves sales forecasting. And I would just want you to think about, if you look in your CRM system, and today is April the 3rd, so April the 3rd, right? And you look in your CRM system and you run your forecast report, how many deals are forecasted to close in March? And when I ask that question of sales leaders, they go, yeah, I know. I keep trying to get my guys to update that, right? And I go, well, firstly, on this behalf of the CRM folks, I think that's lazy because the CRM knows what day today is and know what day it's forecast, and it could easily do something about it, but it doesn't. So what we try and do is go, well, if I can learn from the past, then I know, number one, I can't close a deal in the past. That requires a fairly unnatural act, right? So I can't close a deal in the past. So if we can learn from the past, you'll see one item here called calculated close date, which is something that we do to say, we know what your process is. We know what happens, right? And we know that you can go and learn. And you can predict when a deal will close with more accuracy than the salesperson's opinion. The problem with sales forecasting, for the most part, is it's opinion-based, right? And everyone has a different opinion, depending on how good the day has been, right? And how you feel about it, and whether it's a nice person you're talking to, and so on, right? So you can take that and you can use data, and the velocity that you get in your organization when you have accurate sales forecasts is phenomenal. Salespeople on average spend 2.5 hours a week working on sales forecasts that are wrong. That's the average, right? And the other thing that happens is you kind of look at that and you go, so a map to sales forces or to sales forecasting is your pipeline. And you look at your forecast, you've got your quota, you've got your close, you've got a big pipeline, and there's a weighted average, and you've got percentage that applies to the weighted average, and you apply 43% by the pipeline, and you get a number. That's wrong, right? And weighted pipelines, I've seen weighted pipelines put businesses out of business, right? And if you learn and you have intelligence, you have data, what you can do is take the thing and say, we use a term called projected. And that does what an experienced sales manager will do and say, he's going to win this deal, going to lose that one, lose that one, lose that one, and then you add them up together because you never get 43% of a deal. So when you have data with intelligence and knowledge and context, you can get that kind of information. I want to talk a little bit about what I refer to as modular thinking. And I think modular thinking is an approach that I think doesn't get enough attention as we look at things from sales. And what I mean by that is taking a big problem and looking at it in its kind of component parts and breaking it down into its component parts. When I do that, then I can get to the very discrete level. And when things are happening really quickly, and we have mass customization, which we do with solutions that our customers want, because it's very rare that your solution maps 100% to what the customer needs. It's very rare. And if you kind of think about this for a minute, the impact on a customer of a bad buying decision is typically greater than the impact on a salesperson of a lost deal. Is that true? If we believe that's true, then what happens is you take that to heart and you kind of go, okay, so I wonder what the impact is on the customer. Right? And that's a great kind of thought sequence to be going through, because what happens is you look at it and go, I want to look at this from my customer's perspective. And when you sold stuff, typically you look at an org chart and you go, okay, how do I get to the guy at the top? There's some great research from the Sales Executive Council, the guys who did the Challenger book, on this doesn't work anymore. And it's all about looking through the organization and finding at each space in the organization, all those people along the bottom of the chart, what is it that they care about? We use a thing called collaboration map, and I use collaboration in the sense that we should be kind of collaborating with the customer and breaking down the problem that they have. In this case, you see there's a problem there which is called increased sales effectiveness. And that's what they want to do. And the issues is they want to shorten the new hire ramp up and fix the manager rep relationship and fix the sales coaching problem. And each of those little problems is owned by somebody in the organization, in my buyer's organization. And when I can take their problem and I can break it down into kind of the modules of their problem, then I can have the right to go and apply a piece of my solution to attach to that problem. And similarly, when we think about it in, when you're building your sales to a future, right, as you kind of look forward, right, if we think about it in a modular sense, you also want to pick the different solutions that might fit. And some of the folks outside here in the room. And so we might use our DealMaker solution, and might use something from Inside View, and you might use CRM from Oracle, and you might use Xactly. And we need to think about it from a sales tool perspective. Everything needs to be fully connected, modular, integrated, so we can build an entire solution. The last thing I want to talk about is gamification, and there's some gamification experts who you'll have heard from over the past while. But I want to think about it in terms of, as you put in any kind of system in place, there are two things you want to achieve for the users. The first thing is you want them to be competent. So they need to be competent, and they need to know how to use the system. And the second thing is you want them to be motivated. And motivation, in my opinion, is the harder thing to achieve. And gamification in such that it applies kind of game mechanics to business systems is something I think we should think about. And the truth is we've all gamified things in our lives. And if you kind of think about this, so in Ireland I'd call this tarmac, and you guys would call it blacktop, right? But as I'm kind of walking along the road and I see a crack in the road as a kid, what did you do? Right? You do that, right? And you create this game in your head, right? And you're afraid of what happens if you step on the crack, right? And there's some phrases I've heard from folks that I've told this story before, right? Some of them were strange, but what happens is you start building up this game, and you try and get some reasons to do things, and this is all self-induced, right? There's no change management program going on. There's no executive sponsorship going on. It's all going on in your own head, and that's a good thing. As a kid, I used to have to mow the lawn. Right, I'd call it cut the grass if I'm wrong, but I'd kind of switch over Greenland on the way over, right? But so I need to kind of mow the lawn, and it was a big lawn. I was a small kid, right, and I had other things to do, and I kind of look at this big lawn, and I go, shh, I got to go do this. So I'd take the lawnmower and I'd go down the center of the lawn, and then I'd go over to the side, and I'd go over the side. Now I'd have 4 pieces that were a bit more manageable, and I could manage. I could watch the progress, right? And we've all done this. Right, so I'm getting some feedback on the progress that I'm making as I'm kind of stepping through this, right? So I'm making up my games, I'm getting some feedback, and then the other thing I'm trying to do is I want to find a place where I can be kind of creative, right? And I've got a safe social environment, and there might be my playroom where I'm doing this with my friends, and I'm being social, I'm being safe, and I'm being innovative, and I'm thinking about things. And of course, my parents always thought I was doing, I was playing with books and I was doing that kind of stuff. And in fact, I wasn't. I was doing strange things, but that's another story, right? But if we look at this, though, it comes up to 3 things. As we look at business interactions, and interactions all the time, it's about rules and challenges, it's about goals and feedback, and it's about something that, if we can create for our salespeople an environment that's safe and social and perhaps competitive, then we get some self-induced motivation. And kind of my goal is, any time that we're putting in a system, I want to get to a place where at some point in time we don't need executive sponsorship. We don't need a change management program. Because if the solutions that you provides feedback, is motivated, provides feedback and motivation, then people will choose to use it because it resolves the reward-effort equation. They get more back than they put in. And when that happens, great things happen. Right? In our world, when we put in stuff with our solution, CRM adoption goes up 42%. And does because people get feedback. Right? It's simple feedback. They get knowledge, they get advice, right? And it helps them. And for me, I look at that. And we've all looked at, traffic lights. And you come to a traffic light and it's red and you stop. In Ireland, you kind of look and see what happens, right? And it's green and you go, right? And people respond to green and red. And if I've got a pipeline that looks green and red, I know I need to do something, right, to solve the red bits. This is a view of someone's pipeline. It tells you whether you've got enough in the system to make your quota or not. And he looked at this and it was all red. It's a true story. It looks all red. He goes, shit. That can't be the case. And he gets up and he walks out of the room and he comes back and he goes, I got to fix that problem. And there was no manager intervention. Right? He's going, I got to go fix the problem. And he turned out to be the best performing rep for the next quarter. Right? So he could change it from red to green. So as we kind of step through the journey, what I'd like to kind of I'd like you to think about the 6 factors and think about perhaps some of them are applicable to where you're going on your Sales 2.0 journey. I think they're important. And you remember back earlier when I asked Siri the question, and it said, so I said I'd give Siri another try. Right? And I asked the question, and Siri came back and said, well, scratch that, you should get Dealmaker. But that's clearly a Photoshop answer. But with that, I'll thank you for your time. Our folks are outside if you need to know any more. And it's been my pleasure. Thank you.